Aesthetic and Efferent Listening, a photo story by Charmaine Pelt, Liberty University, Dr. Kathie C. Morgan, Professor. I became nothing but hearing. I would settle down and, propped up against the pillows, listen to my nurse read the Grimm's terrifying fairy tales. Sometimes her voice put me to sleep. Sometimes, on the contrary, it made me feverish with excitement, and I urged her on in order to find out more quickly than the author had intended what had happened in the story. But most of the time I simply enjoyed the luxurious sensation of being carried away by the words and felt, in a very physical sense, that I was actually traveling somewhere wonderfully remote to a place that I hardly dared glimpse on the secret last page of the book. Later on, when I was 9 or 10, I was told by my school principal that being read to was suitable only for small children. I believed him and gave up the practice. Reading aloud to students is a common practice amongst teachers, although some teachers decide to diminish this practice as their students begin to learn to read on their own. So why should we read to students? Well, it improves their literacy skills. Jim Trelease, in his book, The Read Aloud Handbook, wrote that children listen on a higher level than when they read. He adds that listening to other readers stimulates growth and understanding of vocabulary and language patterns. It also improves classroom climate. Teachers typically use an auditory method of teaching because they assume that students know how to listen. Unfortunately, many students do not know how to listen. Poor listeners focus on the speaker's voice, or they focus on the speaker's clothing or looks. They're not really listening to the content, they're distracted. According to the International Journal of Listening, listening skills are imperative to reading comprehension. It's so valuable that 38 out of 51 government entities included listening skills as part of their English language arts standards. These skills are not given enough time in the classroom. Education Digest reports that students are only reporting at 25% listening efficiency. The state of Illinois sees the importance of listening by including a requirement that the students be able to follow complex oral instructions. The goal is to increase listening skills amongst students. Ortlieb, Kramer, and Cheek says, dramatic oral expression makes reading a creative experience. It involves the use of imagery, reflection, and active reading. Now let's focus on two types of listening. The first one is aesthetic listening. The listener listens for pleasure. The listener's focus is on experience rather than information. There are many opportunities for students to listen aesthetically. They can listen to stories being read aloud, poetry being recited, plays, singers singing, or viewing film. The listener focuses not only on their listening experience, but also their connection to the literature. When choosing books to read aloud to your students, choose ones that are fun and interesting. In our text, gives several benefits to reading aloud, thus giving students an opportunity to listen aesthetically. Several benefits are: students' interest in reading is stimulated. Students' reading interests and their taste for quality literature are broadened. Students are introduced to the sounds of written language. Students' knowledge of vocabulary and sentence patterns is expanded. Students are introduced to books that are too good to miss. Students listen to books that are too difficult for them to read on their own or that are hard to get into. Students see their teachers model what capable readers do. Students' background knowledge is expanded. And lastly, students are introduced to genres and elements of text structure. This type of reading opens to them a whole new world, a whole new experience. Tompkins says that we have 3 responsibilities: to activate students' background knowledge of the story, model strategies and provide opportunities for students to use these strategies as they listen, and give students an opportunity for responding to the stories after they are read. So what are these listening strategies that we should teach to students? Well, first, predicting. Students will predict what is going to happen in the story next. Secondly, visualizing. Students will create images or pictures in their mind as they hear the story being read. And lastly, connecting. Students connect the story to their lives, current events, and/or other stories. But perhaps we may be able to give students other opportunities as they listen to us read stories to them. Patricia M. Cooper is the author of Children's Literature for Reading Strategy Instruction, Innovation or Interference. She argues that teaching reading strategies may interfere with the student's imagination. And this would be for students in kindergarten through 2nd grade. So she presents the idea of untaught stories. Rather than always using strategies, we can give students an opportunity to freely listen to stories. Cooper's idea is that the untaught story will help to develop young children's imagination, which will benefit their critical thinking skills as they continue to develop. So let's teach strategies, but let's also give students an opportunity to simply listen and allow their imaginations to soar. Our next type of listening is efferent listening. This involves listening for information or listening done to gain knowledge. Tompkins gives 5 strategies to help improve efferent listening. Teachers can encourage students to write down ideas as they listen. Teachers encourage students to listen for a purpose. Using manipulatives gives students an opportunity to increase their interest in the topic. Creating graphic organizers gives students an opportunity to organize the information that they've heard. Taking notes can help students remember the information. Students are better prepared to listen if they know why they are listening and what they should listen for. Teachers can teach students to organize the information or summarize the idea of the text, get clues from the speaker, and monitor their own progress by asking self-questions. Rather than assuming that students already know how to listen efforently, teach many lessons about efferent listening. We cannot assume that students already know how to listen. Lastly, let's not forget technology in the classroom. It's the 21st century. We can provide students with opportunities to listen aesthetically and efforently. They can use ebooks, audiobooks, iPods, iPads, podcasts, or DVDs.